place of audit in ensuring effective and efficient management and utilization of resources in the public finance system cannot be overemphasized in any climb. This is why we are worried about the apparent systemic neglect of audit and the audit process in our public finance processes. Even from the title of the briefing and from the report, you see that this is the 2017 audit report that is just being presented now. And we also know that in the history of this, of the Fourth Republic, in the last 10 years, we know that the Senate has not even considered once in plenary any of the previous reports submitted to it. The audit role, though one that is expected to be performed by autonomous professionals, is, as it is currently practiced in our public and civil service, one that is put in a handicapped position, and this is clear. And although all MDAs are expected to and do have audit units, the personnel who man them report directly to officers in senior management who are responsible for the processes that these auditors are expected to audit. We can already see that there is already an inbuilt systemic failure or fault lie in this process. Furthermore, these personnel are also expected to clear their reports with their managers before these are shared with the Auditor-General's office. In addition to this, the audit units are often underfunded, understaffed, and do not have access to the requisite resources in human, material, and financial to enable them to carry out their functions appropriately. The implication of all of this is that though audit units exist and auditors are employed, they do not enjoy the institutional autonomy and capacity to render efficient, and at times the audit process itself is shoddy. It is also why nobody gives a damn about the reports that they produce at the end of the day. The more appropriate system strengthening and institution building approach to take would have been for the audit function to be institutionalized in the civil and public services, with the Office of the Auditor-General, which is a constitutionally established office, overseeing and directing, including in line management terms, the audit functions across the board. I hope we are all aware that the Office of the Auditor-General is actually established by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So it's not a creation of presidential fiat or executive fiat. It's a creation of the Constitution. And unlike the Office of the National Security Advisor, that is not created by the Constitution, it is not supported by any bureaucracy. The Office of the National Security Advisor is supported by a huge bureaucracy and has a huge office of its own. In addition to the foregoing, another major gap in the audit process in our public finance is the interface with the legislature. The Constitution mandates the Office of the Auditor-General to audit the public finances annually, to prepare audit reports, and to submit such reports to the legislature. The legislature is then expected to consider and interrogate the annual audit report led by its Public Accounts Committee, again, a constitutionally established statutory legislative committee. If you see all the committees that are established by the Constitution, only two are actually established by the Constitution: the Public Accounts Committee and the Appropriations Committees. Operationalization of this process is seen in the fact that the audit reports are lagging, they are tabled, they are seldom considered, they get to the legislature late, and the legislature oftentimes does not even treat the reports with the seriousness and urgency that such an important matter deserves. Because you would ask yourself, how do you consider and approve an annual budget without having before you a report not only of the performance of the budget, but also of audited accounts of the previous budget? So we have been preparing budgets, approving them, assenting to them in breach of constitutional provisions since the beginning of the Fourth Republic. Yet, if we are to curb wastages in public finance, if we are to enthrone transparency and accountability, and if we are to fight corruption effectively, the way we organize and treat the audit process must change and must be radically transformed.
We, the conveners of Say No campaign and related anti-corruption groups, are appalled by the details of the 2017 annual audit report of the ministries, departments, and agencies in Nigeria, published by the Office of the Auditor-General of the Federation. It is disturbing to know that over 160 parastatals in Nigeria failed to submit their financial statements or management reports to the Office of the Auditor-General, 160, in flagrant disregard to constitutional provisions, and we are talking about Section 85 of the 1999 Constitution and the Financial Regulation 3215, which mandates all parastatals to make such submissions annually. Interestingly, 11 parastatals were reported to have never submitted their financial statements or audited financial reports to the Office of the AGF since their inception. Yet, they have continued to enjoy resources appropriated by the National Assembly and the Office of Budget and National Planning for this number of years, 11 whooping years. 11 parastatals have not at all submitted any audit report, and they've been getting money from the National Assembly. We find this hugely irresponsible and unacceptable. It directly indicts not just the defaulting parastatals, but also the National Assembly and the Office of the Budget and National Planning as complicit in this ongoing fraud. The National Assembly receives annual audited financial report as submitted by the Office of the Auditor-General, whose remarks indicted the erring parastatals. However, in sheer disregard, the National Assembly passes subsequent appropriation to these MDAs without recourse to the report submitted. You continue to appropriate money. You don't ever ask how the money that you've appropriated to them have been spent. Two things will have happened. It's either you are part of the fraud there, or you are indeed the one that enables it to happen. So, however, in sheer disregard, the National Assembly passed subsequent appropriation to these MDAs without recourse to the report submitted, and in violation of its acts, thereby abetting the obvious impunity exhibited by erring parastatals in ignoring their constitutional duty to be accountable in spending public funds. The report also revealed acute financial mismanagement by ministries, departments, and agencies, and their failure to remit surplus funds in billions back to the country's treasury. The overwhelming recklessness of these MDAs and their chief executives has caused our country significant waste of time and resources, poor performance, and has set the country back economically and infrastructure-wise. I think our country deserves better. This report is coming at a time when the Nigerian government is financially desperate to meet its basic responsibilities, hence accumulating foreign debts against expert advice and drastically stifling the mega purse of the ordinary Nigerians in the guise of generating revenue to maintain its high cost of governance that has not benefited the country in years. Accountability of public institutions is the least the government can offer its people for their continuous sacrifice and torture. Despite the prevailing economic situation, this acute waste and irresponsibility cannot be tolerated. The question which bogged the mind, therefore, is what happens to the unremitted surplus resources to these MDAs? Who are the chief executive officers of these parastatals? And why have they not been picked up for prosecution? What are the ministers of these MDAs doing to address these massive acts of corruption going on in their various ministries? How will the National Assembly defend itself for ignoring such damning reports and continue to feed these MDAs fat on the nation's resources through the years?
We believe this report has the needed potential to transform the anti-corruption campaign of the country and bring traction to accountability in public institutions if the anti-corruption agencies will leverage on this report for their investigation and prosecution of offenders. This report has exposed the gaps in our laws, which fails to clarify sanctions for violation. This only weakens government institutions that can only bark but are unable to bite, thereby frustrating the fight against corruption. The Office of the Auditor-General does not have the power to compel MDAs to comply with the law, hence the disregard. The report made key recommendations, including the call to withhold revenue appropriation to the erring MDAs, alongside the other stringent sanctions, which must not be neglected. The National Assembly must wake up to its responsibility of adequately representing the people and take seriously its oversight functions to ensure full compliance with laws enacted, as failure to do so impact gravely on the people that they are meant to represent.
We want the following demands: that the names of defaulting agencies and their chief executive officers be published and full investigation to commence by the anti-corruption agencies. This will restore hope and confidence on Nigerians and will also give the good impression that we are serious about the fight against corruption. Number two, we call on the anti-corruption agencies to be proactive in responding adequately to this damning allegation and take necessary action to hold these officials and their agencies responsible. We demand that erring CEO should be sanctioned and made to submit all outstanding financial reports, which should be thoroughly scrutinized by the Office of the Auditor-General. The National Assembly, the Office of the Budget and National Planning, and Minister of Finance commit thoroughly, scrutinize and audited reports and consider the recommendation to withhold further allocation to this defaulting MDAS until they have satisfied all the conditions. Demand number four. Pursuant to the foregoing, we also call for the passage of the pending audit bill to address concerns raised by the Auditor-General and to conduct review of our laws that have failed to clearly specify sanctions on violators, thereby hampering the nation's anti-corruption efforts. Because if you don't do this, the impunity will continue. And in order to stamp the impunity, you really need to take more serious action and sanction against anybody that he feels is he or she is untouchable. Demand number five. Furthermore, as we expect that the President should be labid and rightly so over this revelation and considers action of this parastatal a sabotage to legacy of its administration to improve governance, we call on the President Muhammadu Buhari to caution his ministers, push them to be responsible, and sanction the ministers responsible for defaulting MDAs. We demand that he directs expedient action by anti-graft agencies over the conduct of the MDAs and their chief executive officers. In conclusion, we would like to conclude by saying that ordinary Nigerians are daily making huge sacrifices to fund and support government, yet the cost of governance continues to rise in the country because of the excessive greed of its leaders who have continuously failed the country and its people. We urge the President Muhammadu Buhari to make it his legacy to sanitize public institutions, wake it of irresponsible leadership, destroy chance of impunity, and give Nigerians value for their patience and trust and loyalty. May God bless Nigeria.